Little difference in height. Hello. Good morning. Good morning. There was mention of Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg sort of sneaked into that somehow. And years ago, you can figure out the year. I had to go down to a funeral that my brother had in the area of Gettysburg. He was a congregational minister, and a cousin of mine came with me and my wife to that funeral. And on the way back, we stopped at a very prominent place in the news at that time, 3 Mile Island. Well, it was very interesting to, you look across the water and you see these 3 big stacks there, and it makes you think a little bit about the future of the world and so on. And so we were standing there, and my cousin Steve, who was just an absolutely immortal joster, said he had to go into the men's facility, and it was a very elaborate building they had for such purpose. And he went in, and he emerged, and he looked at us all. He said, "I shouldn't have gone in. I didn't dare take it out." What's happening to a sense of humor in this world? I don't know. I just don't know. I'm going to read some poetry, and I don't do something filled out. I don't do a lot of rhyming poetry. If I have a structural approach to poetry, which is the syllable counting approach. And I remember some years ago feeling somewhat embarrassed to say that I counted syllables in what I wrote. But then I turned around and I began to think about it. Well, Shakespeare must have done syllable counting. He does iambic pentameter. And whenever he writes in verse, there are 10 syllables in every line. Well, for modern poetry, that is epitomized by the wonderful poetry of Dylan Thomas. It's marvelous. And he wrote a poem called Fern Hill about the place where he grew up in Wales. I hope every one of you will get around to read it someday. But when one writes, one wonders what to write about, of course. I have something that's kicking its way around in my brain, and I sit down and I write a line. And I find it extremely useful to use that line structure for the rest of the poem by the syllable count. It's 5 syllables, 3 syllables, 9 syllables, whatever. In the first line, I've set up the pattern, which is an interesting challenge for the writer, because you write a line that has 8 syllables. Where do I get an extra syllable? Oh, there's the word that conveys the meaning I have in mind. But it has 3 syllables. No, that doesn't fit. I find it enormously useful to use a thesaurus. And I have a wonderful Roget's thesaurus that a good friend gave me some years ago. And it is an opportunity to do what you have to do in writing poetry, and that is push words around. Find a word that fits the space, but conveys the meaning that you have at the same time. Not the denotative meaning, but the connotative meaning, the ambience of the feeling in the word. Is that the right word? And it calls for a lot of fun time thinking about to fill in. But what do I write about? Nobody who has ever read or heard any of my poetry from me thinks that I write candy cotton poetry.
I'm not interested in sweetness. I'm interested in goodness. I'm interested in what alters the way we adapt to our environment, our dear friends, relatives, and what I think of as expressing so much is the human face, and with its absolutely countless muscles that will send the message unconsciously without any determination. It will send what is going back here in the limbic area of my brain, or anybody's brain, that the face very often, unless somebody wants to be a real hypocrite, the face is a wonderful expresser of how we feel about things and how we feel about people. And I think it's a wonderful thing that somehow or other we are given this gift, this combination of muscles that do things and we don't know how they do them. If I have a feeling and it's expressed in my face, I don't know what my face looks like. I'm not looking into a mirror, but somehow or other it comes out here. And I think that's a wonderful distinction about human discourse or intercourse, referring not to reproduction, but the connection that people have with other people. And we have absolutely countless connections all day long. I saw a movie several years ago that some of you may have seen. It was called Venus. Peter O'Toole is the star, and he's one of my favorite actors. In this, he plays a man who's getting pretty close to his dotage, and Peter O'Toole in real life is pretty far along. I don't know about his dotage, but he's an old buck who's wandering around, and he loves the sight of pretty young women, girls walking along the sidewalk in front of a park bench or something. And he indulges in all sorts of fantasies. And somehow or other he gets befriended by an 18 or 19, possibly 20-year-old young woman. And they really develop a kind of tie between them. And they were sitting at one point on a park bench. They were discussing beauty. And Peter O'Toole, as the character, says, you know, when you really get down to it, the most beautiful thing in the world that a man can ever see is a woman's body. Well, that's a nice little thing to say. And it's a pleasurable vision, I don't deny that. But I question whether that's the most beautiful thing. And after thinking about it a great deal, I decided that the most beautiful thing a man can ever see, or in reciprocation, that a woman can ever see, is when he looks into the eyes and the face of a woman who loves him. That's the most beautiful thing. I don't like the word thing, because it's not a thing, it's a spirit that infuses the person of the one speaking and diffuses itself out into that wonderful combination of little muscles that we have in our faces. I would like to start this with a poem that struck me just as a funny little observation on life. And this poem is called Distinctions. This is not that, they always say. You teach child speech. You point at this right beside you, a thing, a spoon, and then you say, this is not that, pointing at the door. And you repeat, drive lesson home to this young mind, not that young mind of other child playing on the floor across the room. That child is there,
and you are here, explaining this demonstrative great mystery, distinguishing what's beside you from what is not. For child must learn such opposite. Thus you explain within, without, on and under, inside, outside, up and down, faster, slower, think cold, not hot, shun confusion, always be clear. Child nods his head, accepts your word, and smiles with wonder. The telephone rings. You pick it up. The child is watching, hears you speaking, thinking, this person talking to that, and hears you say, hello, who's there? But knows you're here, which makes much sense to learning mind. Then overhears you say, who's this? Though this is there at the other end. And another voice heard at distance says, well, who is this? Then says, this is. Later, child asks, just who is that? Using the right words. And you answer, saying, that was. So child replies, not what he said, because he said this. And then you say, well, he was there, thinking he's this. Now child ponders. You say you're this, and he is that. He says he's this, thinks you are that. Child shaking head, smiles with wonder. This is a piece I once wrote about somebody's having a stroke. I remember being with my cardiologist on one occasion, and I said, can you please guarantee that when I have a great big vascular accident in my body, it will not be in my brain, but in my heart? In other words, I don't want to have a stroke. Can you set me up? He said, well, I smiled, and he said, well, I'm not sure I can do that. You visited people and know people who've had strokes. The name of this is When the Caged Bird Cannot Sing. When bodies become prisons and you're there within the cage, immobilized, quite speechless, and people you thought were friends arrive to give condolence, bringing their words of comfort while they look into your face, searching for the familiar, reaching to make some contact because they can't shake your hand, lying lifeless on the bed. They slowly become confused as their eyes turn to wander, while you have 1,000 thoughts, but your mouth won't speak them out, and you see them slowly grope as they try to come to terms, asking you to nod your head in answer to their questions, or always framing their words so you can answer yes, or even shaking your head in disagreement with them. They have new ways of talking that become loud and louder, as if talking with babies or committed idiots, speaking so deliberately it makes you want to scream. You roar back, you roar back and scream, a kind of moan that sets them back on their heels as they grope for connection to make you comprehend them. You beginning to wish they'd go, but they feel so guilty. They do not dare to depart, glancing one to another, trying to conceal their sighs, hoping you cannot read them, trying hard to hide from you, and all the time you read them like a flattened, open book. They've come to give you solace, leaving you disillusioned. And ones you trusted the most are as tongue-tied as the rest. So when they think of leaving, they don't need to speak the words. You see it in their faces, fumbling to extract themselves from painful situation. They sustain their ritual. Softly, their words echo back as their voices disappear. Such a smart person, so sad. This is, all my life, I've loved corduroy. If you ever see me in a jacket, a sort of kick-around jacket, there are 3 chances out of
for it will be one of my corduroy jackets. And I love the sound that corduroy trousers make as you're going. So the name of this is Dialogue. Whis, 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 whis. Corduroy trousers, keeping company with small whispering, befriending my walk. Each leg taking turns, talking to other in cryptic language I don't understand. Sound giving comfort, sometimes annoying. What are they saying? One to another? Or is it to me? Insistently swishing. I never find out. Keep hoping they'll say, big secrets they hide, never confessing. Forget it, I think, must tolerate them. No place to complain as I move along. They really don't scold. No hostile intent. Friendly companions keep interrupting. Whatever I think. They don't stop talking until I stand still. Then back to straight walking and conversation, gladly resuming. This is called, it's interesting to look around the world you live in, looking at people, thinking about them, what's going on inside them. So I wrote this one. It's called Living Mausoleum. Give me the whited sepulchre before my time on earth is spent. He invaded my holy place. I received him with guilty joy. Our joining was a sacrament, clergy approval not needed. When a woman gives love to man, receiving him into herself, is not that the highest sanction, thus given and never retrieved? I find I do not mourn the loss of what I was before he came, but what was then lost afterward. Our wedding day would find me blessed. The world I knew belonged to us. I held it warmly in my palm. Love would be never-ending bliss. We awaited the wedding march. I clutched my loving father's arm. He glanced, wiped away a tear. Suspense was extending longer. Someone came up excitedly. I couldn't hear the whispering. He turned. We suddenly embraced. His tears were multitudinous. What was wrong he couldn't express. The pastor emerged from the crowd. Inside, all heads turning toward me. I was looking for my lover, slowly grasping. He wasn't there. There must have been an accident. No one ever found what happened. It seemed he vanished from the world. Back in my room, within my home, I excluded all my escorts, sitting at the cruel mirror, my face suddenly turning old, ripping away the wedding gown, seeing my shriveling nakedness, unlike what I had hoped to show, giving him all my rich rewards, this very night of wished-for joy, beauty vanishing when he did, aging here right before my eyes, seeming so instantaneous, stark death setting its mark on me, and I awaiting its coming, wiping away my prettied face, seeming too young for burial, when youthfulness belies the truth. I would never feel young again, never in rouge or beautify, better yet, to cover with white, morphing into my sepulchre. Some of you in this community going to a supermarket might have seen an aging woman. For the face as white as that. Every time you saw her, that was how she appeared. Yeah, I kept wondering, nobody could tell me the story. What is it? What is this? So somehow or other, in my thinking and feeling about it, the result is this poem. Another poem is called Spirit In, Spirit Out. Eagerly sucking into me, silently, noisily breathing. How many times my ribs expand, contracting, expelling the air. Feeling so crisp on colder days, delivers needles to my nose, like sucking nourishing nipples from earliest age, ingesting, taking in, absorbing to live. So many joys of awareness, repetitively consuming, hungrily eating when needed. Nature allows me to decide, as with chewing and swallowing, and leaving and timing up to me, washing and cleaning my body, but leaving me some discretion, eliminating from one end what I consume at the other, processing life through every day and in everything I do, avoiding pain and treating wounds. Still, one thing I can't choose to do, giving pleasure greater than sex, outclassing the joys of sunshine, sometimes barely aware of it, beyond daylight into darkness, so unaware when I'm sleeping, strongly gasping after a race, diaphragm and responding ribs, taking in quintessential air, removing vital oxygen, but only a portion of it, nature's way of being frugal, exhaling carbon dioxide, always the inescapable, pleasant round of respiration, so full of joy and benefit. I walked on coldest winter days, shivering in my overcoat, rejoicing in vitality, taking refuge in my center, sensing radiant well-being, energized by surrounding air, enjoying each eager moment, sucking it in, blowing it out, not even wishing to decide. You know, forgive me for saying something so utterly obvious. Life is always interesting. And you frequently hear things about circumstances that you did not witness. And very often your mind does a lot of leapfrogging and cartwheels, bouncing up and down, trying to figure out what human behavior and feeling led to this particular event. This one is called Windowsill. Clutching her wrists, one hand on each pleading, with her struggling so hard, wanting to go to the harsh, waiting ground 12 floors below. This windowsill where she had been sitting only moments before her desperate leap away from his arms, encircling her waist, breaking away, finding freedom at last from his wild reach for her slipping torso, then for her arms flung up toward the sky, one chance in 1,000, seizing a wrist, praise God for the other, grabbing it fast, plunging, she jerks him halfway out the window, screaming at her to believe his love, more real than all her fantasizing on. All the women she thinks he sleeps with now, who could no way ever compare to her. I need you here. I want you in my life. Here with me, the two of us together. Think of our children away at camp. Oh, he had known for long of her inner ills, the secret demons tormenting her life, still doing it now with him shouting for help, sweating, straining against pain of her weight, yelling across to all the closed windows, hating his belted cell phone and hearing her screaming, I don't want to bring you down. If you don't let go, then you'll come with me. His body starting to slide, his belt scraping against the windowsill, reliving their body couplings, but none of them so intimate as this. Sweat increasing, he feels his grip slipping, slippering, sliding. He knows he can't hold. Love cannot win. He has to watch her go. That's something that really happened. Somebody I know. All that I knew about it was that his wife, who obviously had, as I said here, a lot of inner demons, and I'm sure that living with her was a struggle, every day being harder than the one before, until finally, apparently she decided this would be the last day. This is called The Leaving. Stephen's self-examination, so alone. Who cares about me? What will they think when I've left them? That constant need of assurance. Has he ever made a difference? How could I ever explain it? My cousin's shyness, much like mine, his questions were always implied, never directly put to me. Whenever he gave to others, was it to be helpful to them or nourish his own self-image? How can he escape this guilt thing, this raining on his own parade? Has he cared for anyone else? Such thinking running off his tongue. My assurance of his value is just another never mind. Steve knows his disease is mortal, though my loving word should comfort. He keeps saying, stop repeating, and laughs at my broken record. I'm recollecting all his plays, in evidence there on his wall. Photos displayed by his daughter right over his kitchen table. On visits, I'd ask him to recall. Some were domestic comedies. He wasn't famous, but so good the audience went home laughing or shaken to the very core. He had one of the rarest gifts to connect with all who witnessed, each one feeling it's just for him. Final applause and praise felt good. He knew he had hit the target, but he had known it in those moments of joys in his own performing, creating that innermost glow that only an actor can know. He had accepted the compliments, but always questioned their value. What meaning could all of this have when the final balance is made? What profit then rewards his soul, in which he's not sure he believes, but needs a thing intangible so far beyond philosophy? He keeps asking me to tell him, implying questions of his worth through each of his endless phone calls. On the final one, he warns me that his story is still not done. He's picked up a pad of paper, wanting to tell his view of life, that it's not my bowl of cherries, laughs at my urge to cheer him on. He wants to write his last goodbye for all his audiences to see. He chooses then to end this call. Later they find his scribbled pad, words scrawled so hard to understand. There's no one to say goodbye to. His leaving seems so long ago. Living on is all his passion that vitalized his views on life, on politics for sure, and art, inflaming everything he said with his blazing sense of humor. He didn't sit observing life, but hungered to participate, though doubting if he measured up, while always observing himself. But Ruth had her opposite views of him as her terminal nurse when cancer claimed her to her bed, unable to care for herself in even most intimate needs. His care became 24/7, washing her bottom, brushing her hair, giving his full companionship. One day I had telephoned him. He was busy at her bedside. Said Ruth wanted to interrupt. He handed the phone to her for what would be her farewell word to me. I am married to an angel. You know, you can find something very interesting. You just pick a pen and you look at it. Just think of what it's done. You think of where it's been. It tells you if it's done a lot of hard labor or work, so the mind is very soft and gentle. This is called the credentials of humanity. I don't resent them, though I wish them gone. The onflow of time, leaving his footprints so subtly gentle, irreversible, not coming at once, a quiet ambush, calling attention, only when perceived, and then surprising. Why don't we expect, when seen in ourselves, taken for granted when seen in others? Are we exceptions? Statistics say no, but we hope for yes, softly shutting eyes, thinking of the past, reaching out for it, daily embracing images that glow, rejoicing in them, escaping the now. Remembrance so rich we immerse in it, its waters flow round, we splash in the past. Withdrawal follows, we dry ourselves off, scoffing the present, see wrinkles appear. This is called My Travels in Steerage, and it is somehow connected, they don't know it yet, to Don and Lisa, because the occasion that this considers and my feelings about it took place at a farm on the road to the lake, and our host and hostess were Joe and Pam. And in the evening, we had a nice, wonderful, glowing little campfire, a wire fence, 10 feet, 15 feet beyond it, and then in a small sort of corral, a number of cattle just standing there, chewing their cud. I remember as a small boy being absolutely fascinated by the fact that a cow will go chomping away all day long. And then, in the evening, he calls up all that he consumes and chews it. And then he swallows it into his stomach. As a child, I thought was one of the most fascinating. I can't do that with my attitude. Well, I was looking across, and I was looking at these lovely animals and thinking, if I just feel the snout of one of them, it would be velvety, the way it is, the nose of a horse. But so I looked over there, and I turned to Joe, who was standing behind me, and I said, Joe, look at all these wonderful animals. Are you going to send them off to a slaughterhouse? And he said, a sentence I'll never forget. They're alive, son, because they're going to die. He said it almost gleefully, perhaps to counter my sadness. Friends we all were around the fire, warming us in the growing dark. Dimly we could see his cattle on other side of nearby fence, grazing with the night coming on, their bodies insisting on grass, condemned to eat, so we could later. Living in this present moment, having no thought for tomorrow, or so we self-consciously think, fixated as we are on ourselves, certain we are God's achievement, as we travel from birth to end, certain that our journey is posh, unmindful of lower creatures down there in the hold of the ship, whom we consign to the slaughterhouse, whereof they said in my youthful days, steers were moved into narrow alleys, herded by force into single file, moving on with fearlessness, hoping for a better pasture, while overhead a strong man stands, wielding his heavy sledgehammer, bringing it down to smash each skull of animals that had not known what it was that awaited them. So off they go to butcher's knives, justifying their existence, leaving me feeling restless, wondering if I'm a counterpart, pondering on similarities, and of how it is I feast each day, taking for granted I am better, since I know tomorrow will come, unaware it's only a concept, without knowing what dawn may bring, wishing away the unseen forces surrounding us in daily life, pushing us first this way, then that. For instance, struck by unemployment, fired
floods and hurricanes, uprooting plans we make for life, leaving me no more in command of what tomorrow's day will bring than are the grazing steers this night. Though I like to think I'm captain of my ship, my life and my soul, as I whistle against the wind, sail on, we'll reach home port, not thinking of my slaughterhouse, to which I'm closer every day, but cannot specify the time when a hammer will come crashing down, depriving me of life and soul, while every steer knows as much as I do about after that what next will come. This is I have two more. This one is called Ode to an Urn. I had a friend, as a matter of fact, my wife and I rented a flat from them. Middle-aged, always went to church, and he was a very devoted Catholic. I don't know what he ever said in compassion, but I'm not sure he'd really be willing to do that. His wife was somebody that somehow or other got on his nerves. My wife and I thought she was absolutely wonderful, but he didn't. Her mother died, and she had her mother cremated, and he had the ashes put in an urn. Did she place the urn in an accommodation for such things or in the ground? No, she placed it on her kitchen counter right next to the radiant oven. So every morning, John would get up and get dressed. He'd come out to the kitchen, and the first thing he'd see is that damn woman's urn. So this is called Ode to an Urn. It doesn't go into that situation, that just gives context. Why did he seem to be grinning? For all the while he was talking. I was merely asking how long. Should I pick it up tomorrow? Yes, we'll have the box ready then. It always takes a bit longer for men as big as your father. More time to reduce to ashes. His thumbs hooked in his suspenders, his 6 months pregnant belly mound hanging over his belt line, drooling brown lines at the mouth corners, now and then spitting in a cup, self-consumed with quiet chuckles, hinting, wait outside for the black smoke rising in its search for heaven. I had to turn Mother away, diverting from the agony of witnessing this reduction, trying to forget the rumors, all the suspicions of this place, where a human life is reduced, diminishing to dust and fragments, where vibrancy of existence is transmuted into ashes, so cold, so silent, so heavy, when poured out of sight into a box before we arrived the next day, delivered to my outstretched arms that are startled by the weight of it. My mother wept while I carried and imagined their early life, the laughter, the tears, the passion of bodies that intermingled and created me, their eldest, remembering family picnics, their boundless love and sacrifice that led me into adulthood, beginning another cycle, my discovering motherhood, with husband's warm companionship that helped me understand her life, the rigors, the vitality that she had shared with my father. I would never have grasped at all till I walked in shoes that she wore, and only then could comprehend how much her life was in this urn. We didn't discard the ashes. Indeed, kept them in the corner next to my mother's favorite chair, where now and then she touched the urn so warmly and caressingly. I surrendered to her memories, no longer pleading her to get on with her life, for this is how she lived each day.
until a TV headline came announcing the newest scandal. My children and husband cried, "Oh, no!" I couldn't turn it off in time. The news came like an avalanche. A great crematorium fraud. They even interviewed the man who no longer chewed tobacco, having nothing funny to say to stern-faced sheriff's deputies about all the fraudulent urns, confusing the identities, mixing ash with fertilizer before cashing check after check, laughing all the way to the bank. This will be quite a departure. Male, female, man, woman, in the act of loving. And wonderful to contemplate. You think of the values involved. How does each of them feel? I can write for the man, not the woman. And I just pray to God that she reciprocates. How much he aches to penetrate, to become inside her glory, settling there and basking with her in the warmth of common beauty, to celebrate togetherness, a night of closeness, skin against skin, to confer on her all of his love, his excitement at being there, feeling her love surrounding him, warmly welcoming his presence, her hands completing the enfolding, caressing and exploring him, tasting the flavor of his lips that answer her passion with his own, her lips an opening blossom, strong yet soft, so full of messages, all her body speaking so sweetly, welcoming the teasing of his hands, tracing beauty of all her curves, expressing his sense of communion, silently speaking of his desire, mouth seeking and finding a nipple fount of creation and of joy, wanting only to give her pleasure in their sharing of love, transcending bodily senses, visiting worlds above and beyond.